The sun had barely begun to rise when the sleepy little town of Cloverfield stirred with its usual morning rustle. But inside a modest home at the edge of Maple Ridge, grief hung in the air like fog, refusing to lift. 10-year-old Noah sat motionless on the hardwood floor of the living room, his eyes fixed on the silent body of his best friend, a golden retriever named Leo, who had taken his final breath just moments before the world awoke. Leo had been everything to Noah: playmate, protector, listener of secrets, and keeper of childhood dreams. And now, the stillness of his body was louder than any scream Noah could ever muster. For it was the kind of silence that broke something inside you, that hollowed you out without even asking permission. Just last night, they were in the backyard, Leo chasing fireflies, while Noah told him about the spelling bee at school and the mean kids who teased him for stuttering. And Leo, as always, had just wagged his tail and nudged Noah's shoulder, like he always did when words were hard to say. How was it fair that someone who had been there through every scraped knee and midnight thunderstorm had to leave like this, without warning, without goodbye, as if the universe had grown impatient and cruel overnight? Noah's parents stood helpless in the doorway, unsure of what to say or do, for they too had grown to love Leo. But the way Noah clung to the dog's lifeless body, arms wrapped around his soft, now cold fur, cheeks soaked with tears that showed no sign of stopping, spoke of a sorrow deeper than words could reach. And for a long time, they didn't speak at all. The sun rose higher, casting golden rays through the blinds. But inside that room, time had paused, grief trapping them in its suspended haze, until something happened. Something so quietly breathtaking it could have been missed entirely, had Noah not opened his tear-blurred eyes just in time to see Leo's paw twitch. It was small, barely a ripple in the stillness, and for a heartbeat Noah thought he'd imagined it, just a hopeful hallucination in a sea of despair. But then came another movement, this time the faintest flicker of Leo's tail, followed by the softest whine, barely audible, yet unmistakably real. "Mom, Dad," Noah cried, his voice cracking from the hours of sobbing, but now infused with a rush of hope as he shifted to his knees beside Leo, gently stroking his face. He moved, Leo moved, and though his parents rushed forward in disbelief, thinking maybe their son's grief had blurred the line between what was and what he needed to believe, they too saw it, Leo's chest, rising ever so slightly, a fragile flutter that defied all explanation, like life refusing to be snuffed out. Within seconds, they were bundling Leo into blankets and racing to the nearest animal emergency center, praying, bargaining, whispering Leo's name like a prayer on repeat. As the car sped through early morning traffic, Noah never letting go of his best friend's paw, even as the dog drifted in and out of shallow breaths. A vet named Dr. Ramirez met them at the door, her face grim but not unkind, and after a quick examination, she shook her head in astonishment. "This dog, he should be gone. There's almost no vitals, But something's keeping him here, something strong. And as she whisked Leo into the ICU, Noah was left clutching the faint warmth of the blanket, repeating over and over, "He came back, he came back." And though no one could explain it, what happened next would stir the hearts of even the most skeptical. Leo fought for his life in that ICU for 3 days. And during that time, Noah refused to leave the hospital waiting room, setting up camp with books, blankets, and the small sketchpad where he and Leo would draw goofy cartoons of each other. And through every hour that passed, he wrote Leo letters, folded into tiny envelopes he slipped to the vet techs to read aloud to the unconscious dog. On the third night, as thunder rolled in the distance and lightning flashed against the hospital windows, Dr. Ramirez entered the waiting room with eyes red from fatigue and said, "I don't know how to explain this, but he's awake." And he lifted his head when we read your last letter. And the scream of joy that erupted from Noah startled everyone within earshot as he ran to Leo's side. Finding those familiar brown eyes looking back at him with tired but unmistakable recognition, he collapsed beside him, hugging him gently, whispering, "I knew you wouldn't leave me." And though Leo couldn't speak, the slow thump of his tail against the pillow said everything. Over the following weeks, Leo's recovery became the talk of the town. Articles were written. News crews visited the family home, and soon the phrase, "miracle dog," was trending. But for Noah, none of that mattered as much as having his best friend back. Even if Leo needed help walking and had a long road ahead, and something shifted in Noah too. He who once hid from other kids now stood tall when asked to speak about Leo at school assemblies. And though his stutter still lived inside him, it no longer controlled him. Because every time he looked down at Leo sitting proudly beside him, scars and all, he was reminded that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered through wagging tails and quiet comebacks. Eventually, the family turned their backyard into a small sanctuary for senior and special needs dogs, inspired by Leo's story. And every dog that arrived was greeted by Noah and Leo like family, with belly rubs, homemade treats, and bedtime lullabies sung under the stars. And sometimes, when things got quiet and the night grew still, Noah would lie beside Leo in the grass, just like he had on that first morning, hand resting gently on the retriever's chest, feeling the rise and fall of each breath like a secret rhythm only the two of them knew. And deep down, he always believed that it wasn't science or medicine alone that brought Leo back, but something greater, something no one could quite name, something that lived in the space between a boy's tears and a dog's last heartbeat. Even as the sky began to shift in color from a muted dusk into the deeper hues of night, there was an almost sacred stillness in the small field where the child and the lifeless dog lay beneath the weathered oak tree, its bark like an old grandfather's hands, holding generations of whispered secrets and memories. Aaron hadn't moved, his small body curled around Max's still chest, tears drying slowly on his cheeks. The nurses who had come with Mrs. Langley stood at a respectful distance, sensing the sacredness of the moment, uncertain whether to intervene or just watch. But something unexplainable had begun to happen, an odd warmth, a light breeze though the air had been still just moments ago, and a subtle shimmer that danced around Max's fur, as though the fading sun had painted it in strokes of gold. A robin, strangely out so late, perched on the nearby fence, chirping a low, melodic tune, not quite a song, but more like a soft murmur, as if nature itself was trying to soothe the boy's broken heart. Mrs. Langley, heart torn between logic and the aching pull of her own belief in miracles, took a cautious step forward. And then a twitch. Not a strong movement, not the dramatic gasp one might see in a film, but a tiny, involuntary flutter in the dog's ear. She blinked, unsure. Aaron, too exhausted to notice, continued to hum Max's favorite lullaby, the one his father had taught him, a simple tune about stars and safety and coming home. Another twitch. This time Max's paw jerked slightly. The breeze intensified, rustling leaves in a chorus above them. The nurses exchanged glances. "Is he?" one began. "No heartbeat when we checked," the other whispered. But now Max's rib cage rose slightly, then more, and a soft whimper escaped his jaws. Aaron's eyes flew open. "Max," he croaked. The dog didn't answer in words, of course, but his tail, weak as it was, gave the tiniest thump against the ground. The world paused. For that fraction of a second, even the wind stopped. Max was alive. Mrs. Langley dropped to her knees, fumbling for her stethoscope, checking the heart that now thudded gently beneath worn fur. Her eyes filled with tears. This doesn't happen," she muttered, her scientific brain rebelling against the evidence her hands confirmed. But Aaron didn't care about logic. He threw his arms around Max gently, sobbing into the neck of the dog, who had been his only constant through the worst year of his life. The nurses called for an ambulance, not for Aaron, not for a burial team, but for emergency veterinary assistance. News traveled fast. Within 30 minutes, a small crowd had gathered at the field's edge, quiet, reverent. A local vet arrived, wide-eyed at the tale he was told, examining Max with disbelief that melted into wonder. "It's like," he flatlined. Then something pulled him back. The vet whispered, "I don't know how to explain it medically." That night, Max was taken to the clinic, hooked up to IV fluids, stabilized, and monitored. And Aaron refused to leave his side. "He came back for me," he whispered to his mother, who had rushed to the hospital once she heard. "He heard me." And maybe he had. Or maybe, just maybe, the love between a child and his dog had been strong enough to bridge a moment between this world and whatever waits beyond. Over the next few days, Max grew stronger. Tests confirmed his body had been near death, organs slowing, breathing stopped for several minutes. But here he was, tail wagging, eyes bright, a bit weaker, but undeniably alive. The story made its way to the local news, then regional outlets, then viral online platforms. People from around the world sent letters, drawings, toys, even donations for Aaron's future. But Aaron didn't care about any of that. All he cared about was that Max was home. 1 week later, he stood in front of his school's auditorium, invited to speak at the kindness assembly. He didn't have much to say. Just this: sometimes when you love someone enough, and they love you the same, even death listens. And the crowd, full of tough kids, teachers, and skeptical parents, stood in silence. Some wiped tears, some smiled through disbelief, but all felt something shift in their hearts. Max sat beside Aaron the entire time, in a small custom-made vest that read Honorary Miracle Dog. And when the principal tried to pet him, Max leaned into the boy instead, because some bonds are just too deep to be shared days turned into weeks. And the bond between Aaron and Max grew even stronger, forged anew in the fire of that miraculous moment. Aaron's world, once filled with shadows of grief and loneliness, now shimmered with hope and a quiet strength that surprised even those who knew him best. At school, some kids whispered tales of the miracle dog, while others mocked it as fantasy. But Aaron didn't care. He had seen the truth with his own eyes, felt the warmth of Max's heartbeat beneath his palm. Every morning, they took long walks together in the park, where Max's legs, though still recovering, carried him with a determination fueled by love and resilience. Neighbors who had watched Aaron's family struggle slowly began to notice the change. The boy's laughter returned, soft but genuine, and the dog's eyes held a spark that seemed to say, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, Aaron sat beside Max under that same old oak tree, now a place of healing rather than sorrow. "You saved me," Aaron whispered, his hand gently stroking Max's fur, now thicker and healthier, the scars from his ordeal fading but never forgotten. Max looked up, his tail wagging ever so slightly, and for a moment it felt like he understood every word. Life, Aaron learned, is fragile and unpredictable, but it is also woven with moments of pure magic, moments when love defies reason, and the impossible becomes real. Max's story spread beyond their town, touching hearts across continents, inspiring others to never lose faith in the power of hope, kindness, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their canine companions. Aaron's mother, once overwhelmed by loss, found new purpose as a volunteer at the local animal shelter, advocating for stray animals who, like Max, deserved a chance at life and love. And Aaron, now older and wiser beyond his years, vowed to share his story through writing and speaking, to remind the world that miracles don't always come in thunderous roars. They often arrive softly, in the quiet breathing beside a child who refuses to let go. Years later, as Aaron walked his dog in the same park where their journey had begun, he spotted a little boy sitting alone beneath the oak tree, tears glistening in his eyes. Approaching gently, Aaron knelt and offered a comforting smile. Sometimes, when you think everything's lost, something amazing can happen, he said, his voice steady and warm. The boy looked up, hope flickering in his gaze, and Aaron knew that the cycle of love and healing would continue, because some stories are timeless, carried by those who believe in miracles, and the brave souls who fight for those they love, no matter what. And so, beneath the moonlit sky, where shadows and light danced together, Aaron and Max walked home, their hearts full, their spirits unbroken, forever bound by a miracle that changed everything.